Okay, so we're now going to shift our focus from thinking about kind of where this program came from to tell you more specific information about the components that are directed at parents. And again, we're talking about the LIFT program that has multiple components to it. It is a multimodal or multi-level program. And right now we're going to talk about the component that focuses on home. So to get us into the spirit of problems that can happen in the home, let's start with a little video here. So how many of you have had an experience with your child in the store that maybe didn't go to that, but it started that way? Anybody? I've had it many times. Right? A grocery store is set up for this problem, right? Because all the stuff that kids like to buy is low, right? The sweetened cereals are low. Everything else is there. And if you go there and your kid's tired at the end of the day, you're shopping after work, everybody's tired, everybody's hungry, you're probably more likely to buy food that you otherwise wouldn't buy, right? And they are wanting it too. And sometimes if the context is right and the kid is really tired and they do stuff like this, it can get out of control. And of course, lots of people look at you, you're embarrassed, it's harder for you to respond. I don't know about you, but I've had experiences with some of my kids where I had a full grocery cart and I was standing in line ready to go and something like this happened and I just left. I didn't buy the stuff. I said, hey, could you put this away? So, I mean, I've had some tough kids in my life and I know what this is like, but I don't think I ever had exactly that happen. So what's going on here? The question in that video really is what happens next? What does that guy do next? So a process that I mentioned in the last session was a concept called negative reinforcement. And so what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit more about that because this is kind of a key issue that is insidious in families. It's insidious with parents and kids, and it's insidious with partners. So it could start off very simply with a mom or a dad asking their child to do something, like it's time to come in and have dinner. It's time to stop playing the Xbox because it's time to eat dinner. The kid keeps playing. Then the mom or dad asks again, and the kid keeps playing. And eventually, the mom or dad gets a little bit upset, and you can hear in their voice that they're upset. And of course, once your voice gets that way, some kids are really sensitive to that, and immediately they get more upset. Others ignore you. But eventually, the input from the mom and dad gets high enough level that the child detects that you're getting annoyed. And so they start getting annoyed too. So inside they start feeling upset, and maybe they yell back at you. And then now you're both upset with each other, and so you start arguing with each other. Something that John, who was the really 60s guy there, the looking guy in the first film, called nattering. This idea of nattering. Nat, 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 nat. You keep saying things. It's not going anywhere, but you keep kind of going back and forth with each other. You're stuck in this, and then one person escalates and raises the stakes. Let's say your child throws something at you or something like that. And you may respond back by throwing something at them or getting really upset with them and yelling at them more. Or you may de-escalate and stop. And if you do that consciously, if you are aware of that when you're doing it, it's one thing. But what happens is this often happens where you're really not aware of what you're doing and you just kind of give up and walk out. You feel better because you're not with them anymore and they're not yelling at you. But the child just learned that if they stand off with you and keep going, they're eventually going to win because now you're back inside and they're still playing the Xbox. And that's not a good lesson. That's not the way that we need to teach our kids because people need to know how to ship tasks and come in or stop doing things. So this negative reinforcement idea is pretty simple. It happens in all relationships in one way or another. But the problem is that in, let's say, a relationship where a couple may do this kind of thing, and this might be what sets up a domestic violence experience that's pretty extreme. This kind of simple thing. It started really simple, and somehow you go from simple to painful quick. And often it's something like this, where they taught each other to be this way with each other. Just a reminder that in this program, we're focusing on kids that are in the elementary school age. There's 2 parts of the program. One was developed for first graders, and one was developed for fifth graders. This was done for scientific reasons because we were curious. If you try to use these things earlier on, these simple kind of techniques, does it work better? Are there better outcomes than if you do it a little bit later on? That was one of the things we were looking at. But we're trying to help families and schools stop kids from moving from lower levels of problem behaviors up to this red zone. That's what we're trying to do. Or we're trying to help families and teachers help move the kids from the red zone down into a lower level. This model, just I want you to keep it in mind, but we're working here in the elementary school period in the early part, at this transition point, and at the end part. So the parent management training program, why is it called parent management training? The idea is to help parents learn management skills or refine their management skills for their family, right? If you're in work and you've got a team, if you want to get work done in an efficient way, you have to use management skills with the family too, the same way. Unfortunately, some of us grow up in families where we learn those skills, and others of us don't grow up in those families, and some of us really don't grow up in families at all. And so the idea here is to help broaden the skill base that a parent has to draw from, and the notion that there's many ways to be good. There's many ways to be good in life. There's only a few ways to be bad. There's only a few things that we can do to each other that are bad, but there's all kinds of ways we can be good. So what we try to do is talk about some ways to be good, add that to your repertoire of other ways to be good, and then you'll have more resilience, more strength, more things to draw on. So in the parent management training program, it's group-based. It lasts for 6 weeks. There's 1 session per week that lasts for about 2 hours in the LIFT program that happened in the child's school. In between, there is homework that we give, home assignments that we give to families to try out, a simple thing to try out in your home. There's a check-in call on the phone halfway through the week. So if a family comes on Monday, they'll get a call on Thursday to say, how's it going? And then there's other calls if needed. So if a parent didn't try the homework out yet, then we'll talk about, well, what happened? Is there a way you might make it happen? And we'll talk about that. I'll talk about that later. But a key thing is that this isn't just offer a group and then have them come back a week later for 6 weeks. It's offer a group and have contact and support as they're trying to think about new skills. That's the key thing. The typical session process, there's a review of the homework from the last week, brief lectures. I would never do something like I'm doing today, never lecture more than maybe 5 minutes or less. This is not the way to learn these types of things. Little video clips, short video clips that illustrate certain points. Some are longer if the points are a little bit more complicated. Role playing is something that's really common. You saw it in the video of Timmy where they were doing a role play. It was a pretty inactive role play because they were just talking. Usually when we do role plays about timeout, for example, they're up and talking and moving and other things like that. But role plays may happen 1 or 2 minutes. Lots of people hate role plays, but the reality is, parenting is an active process. It's not just thinking, it's doing. And so, and then there's discussion time. So the content for the first grade curriculum, we start the program by talking about ways to encourage positive behavior. And then after we've set that base, we move into talking about teaching new behaviors and setting effective limits, which includes idea of discipline. And then we talk about parents working together with each other, or parents and caregivers working together with each other, and then encouraging positive peer relationships. So these are all elements that you saw in the Timmy movie. It's just they've been expanded into a group setting. And in the 5th grade, there's more focus on, all of that's present, but we also focus on communication and negotiation between parents and children, between parents and parents about issues that come up, and thinking about moving into adolescence. So that's the basic topics. And one thing that's important to know is that in the old days, where this program came from, in the Timmy era, the intervention program went on for a long time. It wasn't just like a 3 or 6 week thing. Therapists would work with families until they got somewhere. And sometimes that might take 6 months or a year of meeting regularly. It was a different time when you could somehow afford to do that, which you can't do anymore in clinical practice, unfortunately. But so this model came out of developing basically a relationship between the therapist and the family, and then building from that, like many therapies do. This is different. It's group-based, and you don't have much time to develop a relationship, and it's a different kind of world. So what I'd like to do now is talk about a session and just go through a session so you can see what it's like. And in your packet, there is a full session on setting effective limits. So if you could turn to that. So here we go, setting limits, week 4. There's some handouts, and then setting effective limits, lesson 4. So this is what the therapist would use. And I think what's important to know about this program is that, and I guess something I was supposed to say up front is that I'm not selling anything. I don't sell this program. I'm a scientist, and I don't sell things. I don't create curriculum to sell. And this is the curriculum that was actually used in this study. This is what it looks like. Nobody bought it, packaged it, made it fancy looking. This is it, you know. And so it's it doesn't like wow you like some of this curriculum that you can buy in schools for schools. But here it is, and this is what we did. And so just know that if you see a typo or something, this is like what was used in the trial. And I think, in terms of evidence-based practices, what's really important for you to know is, where did this come from? What did the people look like, who were doing it? What was their context? What was their setting? What were the materials like? This is it. So you can decide if it's relevant to you based on this. So anyway, you can see this is lesson 4 of the 6 sessions. We've already talked about simple ways to encourage your children to work on schoolwork, to get engaged with chores, to help out around the house, et cetera, et cetera. And now we move into the notion of talking about limits. And we talk about 2 specific techniques, timeout and privilege removal. And I'm going to show you a video that will illustrate the way that we think about those skills. But anyway, so the session starts out with reviewing the home practice, and this is a discussion. And so in the last session, parents were asked to set up a really simple contract with their child in terms of some behavior that they'd like to happen more often at home. And so in this part of the session, we talk about how did that go, and what was it like, and what were some of the pitfalls, and how did things work. You can read through that. Then we move into talking about an overview of the idea of discipline, or setting limits. And the way that we view discipline is that discipline is the opportunity to provide guidance to your children. I mean, that's what it's about. It's letting them know when things go out of bounds. It's a lot better to let them know when they went out of bounds if they're just driving on the edge of the road rather than they've gone off the road. In Guatemala, there was a lot of roads where there was no curve, and we were driving along it, and it's like, okay, if we go off about 3 more inches, it's 7 feet down, and then it's another longer after that. So the idea here is to help, as your kids, driving down the world of life, that if they get a little bit off, you want to give them some correction back. You don't want to wait till they go all the way off when it's impossible to correct because they may be going down the slope. So you'll see that in this session, basically the therapist, the interventionist, the instructor, the words that they say are something along the black. The last several weeks, we focused on ways to encourage your children, blah, 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 blah. The idea in this curriculum and the way that we used it in our study is that this was a guide for what people would say, but they need to make it their own. So if you happen to be somebody like me who has a lot of kids, I might introduce this by talking about an example from my own parenting. If we had an instructor who didn't have kids but had experience with kids and with parents, they would use something else from their experience. But often, the idea in this program is that there's a general script that we'd like people to follow, and that they needed to be presenting the information that was within the bounds of the program, but they might do that in a variety of ways and make it their own. So we talk a little bit about rules, and you can see how that goes, and we do a variety of talking about how the key points in discipline are, finding ways to be consistent, finding ways to show, to act as if you're calm, even if you don't feel that way. Like I say, there's some kids that just have really good detectors, and if you stray a little bit and they know you're not calm, then you're like setting yourselves up for a problem, and it's really important to know how to manage that. To disengage and not get stuck in a battle, to try to deal with little misbehaviors rather than waiting for big misbehaviors, and the key to all of this is paying close attention. So we talk about those kinds of issues, and then we show this video. So we've now gone from the 70s to the 80s, and now we're in the early 90s. So, we've got perms, we've got all that stuff going on. So you'll see that here in this video, so in our little historical tour. So.
The limits parents provide teach children how to behave at home, with friends, and out in the world. This tape will show a 3-step approach to teaching children good behavior through limit setting. Establish clear rules. Stay involved. Follow up through encouragement or timeout. When you establish a rule, keep the following in mind. Be calm. When you're upset or angry, you're not an effective teacher. Your child will hear your anger, not your message.
You guys are so loud I can't even read in the living room. Knock it off.
Give yourself a minute to calm down before correcting your children's behavior.
You guys, I'd like you to play quietly so I can't hear you in the living room. Understand?
Get your child's attention.
Sarah?
Be sure you have your child's attention. Making eye contact helps.
Can I run you back for Jenny's by 4 o'clock?
Okay, Dad, I'll keep checking for time.
Okay, good girl. Have fun, Sarah.
Make requests simple. Simple requests make it easier for your child to do what you want.
Please put all your food away after you make your snack.
Too many requests at once can be confusing and hard to remember.
Ashley, put all your food away after you make your snack. I want the counter to be clean, make sure there's no spills on the floor, and I want you to eat your food in peace.
Be specific. Tell your child clearly what you expect.
I can't do this. You need to help me.
Kelly, stop that.
Stop what?
Eddy was vague about what he wanted Kelly to do.
Kelly, please don't whine when you ask for something.
Now she knows exactly what she needs to do. Each time you establish a rule, it's important to follow up. You do this by staying involved in your child's progress. At the first sign of compliance, offer encouragement.
I really appreciate when you two play together quietly.
Sarah, hi. Hey, you ran out of time.
Hey, no, Lily.
You did? Well, I'm impressed. That's good.
I appreciate that you had everything put away after your snack. Thanks.
Dad? I want to help you play homework. Will you help me?
Sure. Thanks for asking. Nice tone of voice.
I don't understand this.
Okay.
When children forget or ignore a rule, first remind them of the rule, then suggest an alternative positive behavior.
Remember the rule, no cars in the kitchen while I'm cooking? Let's take them to the living room.
Sometimes when a rule is restated and an alternative suggested, a child may continue to misbehave. Then it's time for timeout.
Son, I just reminded you about the rule, and I asked you to take the cars to the living room. You didn't do that. I think you need a quick timeout.
But I'm just exactly
Timeout now.
Five minutes in timeout is the most effective amount of time for correcting misbehavior.
Time's up.
In 5 minutes, children can learn their behavior is inappropriate. It gives them a fresh start.
Now would you please take those cars into the living room?
Notice there was no discussion of the problem behavior after timeout. Mom merely asked Ricky to take care of the problem. Timeout is a brief, mild consequence. It can be used often to remind children of the rules parents set. It involves quickly sending the child to a neutral setting to stop misbehavior. Before starting to use timeout, there are some things you need to do. If there are two parents in the family, discuss the use of timeout and agree to support each other.
So what Carolyn and Max suggested, it sounds like it worked with our kids. We know that lecturing doesn't work.
Right.
And grounding them just carries things out, drags them out forever and ever. And
That's true.
neither of us likes to spank the kids.
That doesn't seem to work, and I don't like getting that angry.
Yeah, and everybody feels bad afterwards.
I don't think we have that serious of a problem with the kids. I'm not aware of it.
We don't. Timeout isn't just for kids with problems. It's for kids too.
Okay.
I think it could help the kids understand what we expect of them, without having to repeat ourselves to the point where everyone gets upset.
Okay, let me see if I have this straight. First, explain the whole routine to them before there's a problem.
We don't want timeout to come as a surprise to them.
Okay. But then, when there is a problem, we repeat the request, we give them 15 seconds to start to do what we've asked. Now, is that enough time?
Yeah, it really is. Look at your watch and see how long 15 seconds takes. It's not like we walk to the opening timeout.
That timeout for just 5 minutes. Do you think that's really enough time to do it?
Yeah, feel relaxed it is. And it gives the kids time to stop what they're doing, pull themselves together. And it's really made a difference in their house.
I can see using timeout as kind of a gear change. But what if they don't go?
Dad's question is a good one that we'll answer later in the tape. It's important first to consider how to set up for timeout. The place you use should be safe, boring, and removed from family activity. Good places are bathrooms, laundry rooms, or hallways. Whatever place you choose should be child-proof. Also, before you use timeout, practice with your children. It helps them know what to expect.
I want to talk to you some more about timeout and how it works so you'll understand. We're going to practice what will happen when I ask you to do something and you choose not to do it. For example, when you don't do what I ask, I'll say, Todd, you need a timeout.
This is silly.
It may sound silly, but it's important you know the routine. Now, the timeout room is the bathroom, and you'll stay there 5 minutes. I'll set my watch so that we know when the time's up. If you don't go there right away, I'll add another minute. If you still won't go or you argue, I'll say that's 1 more minute. If it takes up to 10 minutes and you don't go, then I'll take away privilege.
Like what?
Like riding your skateboard for a couple of hours, or being able to visit next door for the afternoon, or watching a TV show that night. Okay, so who wants to practice?
I will.
All right. Now I'll ask you to do something, and you refuse, so we can see how this works. Seth, would you please pick your coat up off the floor?
No way, Mom.
Pick your coat up off the floor, or go to timeout now.
Forget it.
That's 6 minutes. Good practice.
Children won't always go to timeout quickly or quietly. These are times to add minutes. Children can refuse to go by ignoring you.
Instead, I want you to put away the card game now and set the dining room table. Or you can go to a timeout. Okay, that's timeout. That's 6 minutes from timeout.
Sometimes children say no to timeout.
I told you the sensors over here at 7:30, you can voice pick up on them.
But they got the house it up.
Ashley, you need to start picking up your dolls now, otherwise it's time out. That's a time out, Ashley.
Mommy, I want to play with my doll.
That's 6 minutes now.
Both of these parents ignored what their daughters said or did, and they stayed focused on getting their children to time out. They made a request, gave the child 10 seconds to comply, restated the request, and added a minute each time the child ignored or talked back. Add only 5 minutes to the initial 5. When the child has earned a total of 10 minutes, he or she should be given the choice. You can have 10 minutes in timeout or lose a privilege. The privilege should be important to your child and should be removed for 2 to 3 hours.
Seth, your half the bedroom looks really good. Thanks for doing such a thorough job. Todd, your half is still a mess. Go make your bed and then throw the dirty clothes in the laundry.
But me and Seth are busy.
Please go make your bed, then put the dirty clothes in the laundry, or go to timeout.
Well, I always get it done. Why do I have to do it now?
I asked you to get started and you haven't. Go to timeout now.
What's the big deal?
That's 6 minutes.
I won't go.
That's 7 minutes. You can take 10 minutes now and time out, or not ride your skateboard from 4 to 6.
I don't really care.
Okay? No skateboard from 4 to 6.
After Mom puts the skateboard away, she'll come back and tell Todd he'll need to clean up his game before he leaves the living room. Sometimes problems happen during timeout. Children can make messes. Have the child clean up.
You've made a mess while you've been in here. You can come out after you put all of this paper in the wastebasket.
Or they can have a hard time calming down right away.
Timeout will start when you're quiet.
If children can't settle down after a few minutes, tell them they seem unable to take a time out. Then remove a privilege.
I guess you're not able to take time out right now. Instead, you're not going to be able to watch TV for 6 to 8 tonight.
Both of these moms stayed calm. They corrected the problem and didn't get drawn into a lecture or an argument. Situations arise when more than one child needs a timeout. It's good to have more than one place ready for timeout.
Okay, girls, you've been in here for half an hour.
I want you to settle down and finish washing the dishes.
I asked you to settle down and wash the dishes. You both need 5 minutes of time out.
Wait a minute, girls.
Sam, you take time out in the bathroom. Sarah, you go sit on my bed.
Once timeout is a regular part of your family routine, you can use it in other settings. To be successful, catch problems early.
Maybe you ready to catch those big ones, man? You bet.
Not a good idea for you to be trying that in here. You definitely have to put it down right now. Why don't you come down here and pick out some lures and we can use later on when we go fishing?
Okay.
I asked you once not to be trying to pull in here. Please give me the pull now.
I'll go outside, Dad.
Because Lonnie is excited about the fishing trip, he's having a hard time doing what Dad asks.
I asked you to give me the pull and you didn't. You need a timeout now.
Oh, Dad, here?
Looks like Lonnie needs a few minutes for timeout.
I know.
Yes, we need to remove him from the action for a few minutes. At home, he's the background.
I thought he was going to remodel. It's a mess. Maybe the hall would do. I think we can share up there.
Oh, thanks. Honey, Lonnie can use the hallway for timeout.
Okay, Lonnie, you can share in the hallway.
John sometimes has problems behaving when the family is out to dinner. Mom and Dad are careful to catch the beginning of misbehavior so everyone can enjoy the evening.
Between your legs, take a look at your menu and see what you want to eat. Do you have hamburgers? Yeah. You want a hamburger?
It's time to calm down and see what you want to eat now, John. We asked you to calm down and decide what you want for dinner, John. It looks like you need a time out.
But what about dinner?
We'll take your time out right now. We still have time for dinner. Let's go. We'll be right back.
Right here.
Mom will take John out to the car for 5 minutes.
Is there a problem?
No, my son needs to take a short break. If you need to take an order, my husband can order for us, but we'll pass.
That's okay, I'll wait. I wish more parents would take the time to do that with their kids.
To be effective in teaching children good behavior, timeout should be used consistently. When children learn to stay within the limits, the need for timeout arises less often. Establishing clear rules, staying involved, and following up with encouragement or timeout helps children feel confident, in control, and helps them in their relationships outside the home.
But there's a handout in your packet in this week 4 setting limits that reviews these particular procedures. And the reason that we talk about doing timeout this way is it's very simple. It's very simple to remember. And the whole notion is that if you teach your children earlier that this is how a process goes, and then you do it over time, then you can set them up to take timeouts. And you saw in this thing that when that kid went to timeout and he didn't do the timeout right, then the backup is, well, then we're going to take something away, a privilege away. But then he clearly said, oh, I can take a timeout. I'll shut the door and go back in, because he didn't want the privilege removed. So the notion here is this is a very simple procedure. It's not very complicated. The whole idea in this program is to help give parents a few simple skills that if they use regularly, it can stop problems from happening in the home that lead to escalation and more severe things. And even though it may seem like, there's overwhelming issues going on with families that I work with, how would something like this be helpful in any way? What we've found is that if you can help families, give families a few simple tools that they actually have control over and that they can do, and if they have success in those, that can open doors for them that they didn't otherwise have. Because if you're living in a situation with a child that's extremely aversive and being home is really hard to do, or if you're not teaching your kid how to behave in the way that you'd like, it's going to be the way I just described eventually, then you have basically chosen to check out from your kid's life. And we have to be present as adults. So these are just little techniques to be present. So if you look at this guidelines for timeout, just to review, the basic ideas are select a place where your child would have a timeout, prepare the room so that it's not set up for lots of mischief like the toilet paper thing that you just observed. Explain the timeout procedure to your child and practice it with them. Do a role play with them and practice. They'll think it's silly, but that's okay. And that's actually part of the thing, is having fun together. The content that we're talking about here could just be presented by an instructor without the tapes, but one of the reasons we made the tapes is they are kind of goofy and funny, and they get people to think, and you're seeing other people do it. Once you decide to do this procedure, be consistent. If a child does something that's out of bounds, you label the behavior that's out of bounds and tell them that they need to take a timeout, just like you watch. You notice how calm these people were when they were trying to give that timeouts. Obviously, that's one of the hardest things to do as a parent, and it takes practice. But the idea here is that together, if you start young enough with your child practicing this, you can practice to be calm in this setting. It's not easy to do. Just when I was getting ready to go to Guatemala, I had one day at home, and we were supposed to go out and get a Christmas tree. And so we always go out into the woods and get a tree. And so we're out there, and usually when we do this annual trip, we have an argument about the Christmas tree, and it's tough, But this year we didn't. It was so great. We all chose this Christmas tree, but I could tell when we chose it, it was going to be too big. And we cut it down, and we put it on top of the car. And I thought, oh gosh. And so we got home, and this tree wasn't going to fit through the door, you know. And our house isn't very big, and so we had to like completely rearrange the living room to figure out how we were going to get this tree in the living room, you know. And of course, this is where the problem started, because everybody had a different opinion about how the living room was going to be rearranged for various reasons. And I was starting to get upset about this because I'm thinking, I got to pack, I've got to go to the airport at 3 a.m. It's now 5 p.m. I got to figure out how to get this tree in the door. And anyway, what happened was that I did get really upset with one of my kids. And instead of giving a timeout, we all chose to give ourselves timeout. So everybody left. Of course, I was the worst offender and gave my timeout last to me, but I didn't tell timeouts to them, but everybody just kind of said, okay, I'm leaving this situation, you know. And I think that's the consequence of doing something like this when kids are younger, is you teach people that the way, when you start getting engaged with each other and you realize this is stupid, you step back, you know. And so what my daughter went with my wife to take the kids, take the dog on a walk, and you know, another kid went to the store, and everybody just kind of split because we were arguing about furniture, you know. It wasn't worth it. But lots of times in families, it starts that way. You start arguing about something really silly. And I was saying to people, I know I'm getting upset here, but I've got to get something done, and we got to jam that tree through the door, and just let me rearrange the furniture. Anyway, but you know, this is like, you got to practice and learn how to keep yourself calm, and you're going to fail sometimes, like I did. But we did eventually jam the tree through the door, set it up. Before I left, the lights were on, and everybody was happy. But you know, but anyway, that's a consequence, I think, of learning how to teach people that the way to deal with situations is to back off from each other and take a break, rather than engage with each other and get aggressive. So anyway, label the behavior that earns a timeout. Don't talk to children when they're in timeout. Use a timer. And when the timeout is over, don't make children apologize, because this is another place where parents get in trouble. It's like, oh, you're done, and now you got to say you're sorry, you know. And then it's just the opportunity. You're asking for a fight again. So you're asking to engage again. It's over. They served their time. It's done. And then if children refuse to use timeout, stay calm. Add up to 5 extra minutes, and if they don't go, then you remove a privilege. So what I'd like to do now is to have each of you pick a partner or two, and I'd like you to try out this timeout procedure. And the way that we do it in Lift, always when we do role plays, is that we practice playing it the wrong way first. So have one of you be the child and another one be the parent, and have the child act up, and parent do it the wrong way. Don't do what you're supposed to do. And just experience what that's like. And have it last a minute or two. And when that's done, just talk to each other. What was it like to be the child? What was it like to be the parent in that situation? Okay, that's the wrong way. Then I will say switch. I'll say stop when it's time to stop the role plays and debrief for a minute together. Then we'll do the right way. And the right way procedure for our program is this timeout procedure, which you have a handout on. And what I'd like you to do is choose one of the people to be a parent, one of the people to be a child. Child, you don't have to automatically behave like happens here. You can misbehave. But parents, try this timeout procedure out, okay? So typically when we do role plays, we illustrate the role play up front with just 2 people, because one thing that happens when you break up in role plays like this is sometimes people do role plays and sometimes they talk about other things. They may talk about timeout conceptually, but the whole idea is to actually experience it, what it feels like as a child, what it feels like as a parent, to have it go right and to have it go wrong. We always do both ways, a wrong way and a right way, rather just than one way. And the main reason is so that you can have the opportunity as a parent to feel what that feels like, to see what you think when you're in the right way and the wrong situation. We usually do both sides so that you get to experience that. So anyway, this little technique, which usually starts by illustrating it up front with just 2 parent volunteers, and then having people try it out, and then kind of circulating around is commonly what we use. So I wanted to illustrate that because in this program, we would use the video to kind of set up the concepts, get the ideas, use the handouts to kind of reinforce those ideas, and then do a role play to try it out, rather than just lecturing, rather than just watching a video, or rather than just doing a role play. So there's 3 chances to pick up the information. Then the 4th chance is that you say to the parents at the end, okay, I'd like you, here's a homework assignment. Try to introduce time out to your kids this week. Don't use it, just tell them what you're going to use and have a discussion about it and role play it and let me know how that goes. And then middle of the week, we'll call up and we'll say, well, did you try that out yet? You know, and they probably say, no, I'm too busy, or, well, what would it take to set things up so you could try it out? You know, is there a time when you might be able to try it out? And so then we just try to get them to commit, commit, well, I think maybe on Saturday afternoon I could try that out. Okay, good, all right, could I call you Saturday night and check out and see how it went? And so you try to just kind of get people to get over the hump because the hard thing is that as a parent, you're busy, you'll hear about this stuff, but it's really hard to actually start using it. And once you start using timeout, if you're using it right, it's very reinforcing. If you're doing it correctly, you can realize, hey, this really can work. But you don't know that till you do it. And so anyway.